It was 2 in the morning when I pulled up to the house on Linden Avenue. Mia was slumped against my right shoulder. Her black sequin dress shimmered under the porch light, and her head felt heavy in that helpless way drunk people do when their bodies finally give up. I practically carried her to the front door and knocked. The door opened. She stood there in a fitted grey wool dress, dark hair falling over her shoulders in soft waves, one hand resting on the doorframe. She did not gasp. She did not immediately reach for her daughter. For 1 full second, maybe 2, she simply looked at me. Then she stepped forward, carefully lifted Mia off my shoulder, murmured something too quiet for me to catch, and turned back to me. Rain began tapping against the porch roof. I caught the scent of her perfume, sandalwood and bergamot. Behind her, the hallway glowed amber. A faint trace of nude lipstick rested at the corner of her mouth. "You didn't have to bring her home," she said. "But you did. She's my friend's cousin." It seemed right. Her mouth barely curved. Most men do what is easy, not what is right. She looked past me toward the wet street. "It's late. The roads are bad. Stay here tonight. The guest room is ready. Come inside." I nodded before my mind could catch up. That was the first thing Diane Carrington ever said to me. I had no idea it would change everything. My name is Ethan Walker. I was 32 years old, and I worked with my hands. I owned a small woodworking shop on the east side of Hartwell, a mid-sized American town tucked between 2 rivers. I built custom furniture for people who wanted pieces that would outlive them. Dining tables, bookcases, built-ins, cabinets, anything made to last. The shop was small, but it was mine. Every inch of it had been built, repaired, or earned by my own hands. I lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from the shop. My father died when I was 19. A stroke. No warning. My mother moved to Oregon 2 years later to be closer to her sister. We talked every Sunday, but I had not visited her in 8 months. That was on me. I was not a big talker. I was not the kind of man who walked away when things got hard. I used to think those were strengths. Then I met Tessa, and over 4 years, I learned that loyalty without judgment is just another name for being trapped. Tessa was 28 when I left. Beautiful in the way that was made for flash photography, painted lips, ring lights, and a social media feed she treated like a second job. 12,000 followers. Every quiet evening became content I was expected to perform in. At first, it was fun. Then the volume never stopped climbing. I remember the scene she made in a steakhouse because I asked the waitress how her shift was going. I remember the night she posted a crying video on Instagram because I did not answer her messages for 2 hours. I had been in a meeting with a client. My phone was sitting in my truck. She did not care. The night I finally left, she threw my phone against the floor and screamed that I would never find anyone who loved me the way she did. Even in the middle of it, I remember thinking, maybe she's right. 7 months later, she was still texting me at 2 in the morning. I did not answer, but I did not block her either. And I hated myself for that small hesitation. I had trained myself to believe love had to be loud in order to be real. I was wrong. The only reason I went to that party was Marcus. He was my best friend from high school, married now, and worried about me. For 3 straight weeks, he kept saying I needed to get out of my own head. Eventually, he pushed me into agreeing to a Saturday night party. Mia was Marcus's cousin on his mother's side. She was 24, a barista downtown, the kind of girl who laughed at every joke, even the bad ones. That night, I watched her take 3 shots in 20 minutes. Then I saw a guy in a backward baseball cap drop onto the couch beside her with no intention of leaving. I pulled her aside, called a cab, then cancelled it. I told Marcus I would drive her home myself. On the way, she mumbled against the window. Most of it was nonsense, but one piece stayed with me. "My mom," she whispered. "My mom is amazing. She designed our house herself. Dad's gone. It's just her." I did not think much of it then. I just wanted to get Mia home safely and return to my quiet apartment. I had no idea that was the last night my life would ever be that simple. I woke up in the guest room a little after 7. The bed was a queen, dressed in white linen. The air smelled faintly of dried lavender from a sachet on the nightstand. Downstairs, soft jazz floated through the house. Chet Baker. My father used to play him on Sunday mornings. I went downstairs in the same shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled, hair flattened on one side. Diane stood at the kitchen island wearing a loose cream cashmere sweater and narrow black silk pants. She was barefoot. Her hair had been twisted up and pinned with a wooden pencil.
No makeup.
She looked even better than she had the night before. The kind of beauty that did not need lighting. Mia went to her Saturday shift at 7, she said without turning around. I drove her at 6. I cleared my throat. I had planned to thank her and leave. That was the whole plan I had put together in the shower. She set a coffee cup in front of a bar stool. You haven't eaten.
Sit.
It was not a suggestion. I sat. The coffee warmed my hands. Morning sun slid across the inside of her wrist. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and warm bread. As I sat there, it occurred to me that this was the first woman in years who did not seem to need me to perform anything. How old are you, Ethan? She asked, finally looking up. 32. She nodded once, as if confirming a number she had already guessed. Old enough to know better. Young enough to still learn. A good age. I stayed for breakfast. It had not been in the plan. But I stayed. She cracked 4 eggs into a skillet, tore basil from a clay pot on the windowsill, and made omelets the way a person does after making them 10,000 times. I asked about the house. I had noticed the rosehip pattern on the cabinet hinges when I came downstairs. Honest work, she said. Old school. Mark and I designed this place together. Mark had been her husband. He died 3 years earlier. A heart attack at 51. He had been in the garden. I did not pry. I just listened. She did not cry. She did not shrink around his name. She spoke about him the way people speak about a season that has ended, with gratitude, without clinging. She said he taught her how to choose doorknobs, how the angle of a window changes morning light, how to read a blueprint like a sentence. She said grief had not broken her, exactly. It had just rearranged the furniture inside her mind. I asked how she had kept the design firm going. She said she had not, at first. For 6 months, she handed everything to her partners. Then one Tuesday morning, she woke at 4 o'clock and decided she was done being a passenger in her own life. By 7, she was at the office. That had been 3 years ago. She had not been late once since. What struck me most was what she did not do. She did not worship the pain. She spoke about what the pain had taught her. There is a difference. Most people never notice it. My phone vibrated face up on the counter between us. Tessa. The 3rd time that morning. I turned the phone over, screen down. Diane did not ask. She did not even glance at it. But I knew she had seen. After a long pause, she simply said, "You don't have to explain. We all have people we are still learning how to leave." The next Saturday, I showed up with a bookcase in the bed of my truck. Small walnut piece. 4 shelves. Usually, I would charge $800 for something like it. I had built it from Sunday through Thursday in the evenings after finishing paid work, telling myself it was a thank you. That was how I explained it to myself. This time, Mia opened the door. Her eyes went wide. Then she broke into a smile. "Mom, Ethan brought you something." Diane came around the corner from the reading room and stopped for half a second. It was the kind of stop where a person catches their own face and resets it before you can read too much. She crossed the room and placed her fingertips on the top of the bookcase. She ran her thumbnail along the grain. "You made this." It was not a question. I nodded. She placed the bookcase herself beneath the reading room window, refusing my help. The light fell across the walnut the way it falls across skin. She stepped back, one hand on her hip, and looked at the bookcase as if it were a person. Slowly, she ran her palm over the top edge again. I watched her face pass through something I did not know how to name. Then she turned to me and said, "Thank you. I don't think you know what you just did." I started to answer. She raised one finger. "Do not make it smaller." That hit me hard enough to feel it in my chest. For the first time in years, I had given a woman something and she had not asked why I had not bought flowers instead. Tessa treated every gift like a shortage. Diane received it as if I had handed her a small piece of weight for which the floor was finally ready. A week later, she invited me to stay for tea. We sat on the back patio. The garden was small, enclosed by old brick, but full of life. Tomatoes climbing twine, thyme, and oregano in stone pots. Mint in a wooden box she told me she had built herself. The year after Mark died. Mia was at a friend's house. The home felt different without her. Quieter, but not in a sad way. Settled. I asked, then immediately regretted it. Are you lonely? She did not flinch. She looked at her tea, then at the brick wall, and took her time. Yes, she said. But loneliness is not the enemy. The enemy is clinging to the wrong person so you do not have to feel it. I went still. I thought about Tessa. About 7 months of not answering, but also not blocking. About the little strip of light I had left open in case I became weak. Diane did not ask about her. She did not probe. But she taught without giving advice, simply by the way she sat with her loneliness like a houseplant she had named. She poured me a second cup without asking. The mint in it came from a box 6 steps from my elbow. She told me she started building that box the week she returned from Mark's funeral because she needed to hammer something. The first time, she cut every board wrong and made herself start again. She said sometimes the most honest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to let your hands stay idle. That was when I told her the smallest part of Tessa. Not the whole story. Just that I had left someone loud and was still learning how to live in a quiet room without assuming the silence meant something bad. Diane nodded. She did not tell me I had done the right thing. She did not say anything at all. She just nodded, refilled my cup, and let me sit in a silence I was still learning to trust. 2 weeks later, I showed up with my tool bag. The back door had been sticking. Mia had mentioned it casually during my last visit. I had thought about it all week. I took off the hinges, sanded down the swollen edge of the frame, and set everything back into place. 22 minutes. Diane spent the whole time in the kitchen, browning onions, and talking to Mia about a customer at the cafe who had ordered 7 different things and complained about all of them. She did not watch me work. She trusted me. When I finished, she called us to eat. All 3 of us sat around the kitchen table. Mia told stories with her hands. Diane laughed with that low, quiet laugh of hers. And I laughed too. More than once. I could not remember the last time I had laughed at a dinner table. The kitchen smelled of tomato sauce and roasted garlic. 2 beeswax candles stood on the table. Not for romance. Diane simply liked candles. Their light caught her eyes through the flame, and I had to look away. After dinner, Mia kissed her mother on the top of the head and went upstairs. Diane and I cleared the dishes together. She washed. I dried. When she passed me the last plate, her fingers brushed mine. Accidentally. And yet not accidentally. Neither of us moved for half a second. Neither of us pulled away. Then she calmly stepped back, dried her hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle, and said, "It's late." I nodded and went to the door. She walked me to the porch, watching me with one hand on the frame, just as she had that first night. "Ethan," she said, "I am not in a hurry. Whatever this is, neither of us has to rush it." I drove home and did not sleep until almost 4 in the morning. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her hand around a coffee cup, the wooden pencil in her hair, and the way she said, "Neither of us has to rush it." No question. Before I left that night, she stopped me once more at the threshold and said, almost privately, "I am 46. I buried my husband. I do not play games. If you are unsure, that is all right. But do not pretend with me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I told the truth. I have never been so sure of my own uncertainty. She laughed once. A short, low sound. That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 3 years. Tessa showed up at my workshop on a Saturday afternoon. I was running a hand plane along a maple board for a client's kitchen island. Curls of wood shavings gathered by my boot. The bay door was halfway open. I heard her heels on the concrete before I saw her. She was wearing a tight red dress, the kind she put on when she wanted to prove something to a room. Heavy eyeliner. Her perfume hit me before she reached me, jasmine and alcohol, sharp and stale at the same time. She was drunk. It was 3 in the afternoon. "I heard you've got someone new," she said. "Some old woman." I slowly set the plane down. I did not ask how she knew. I had already pieced it together. Marcus. His cousin Mia. Mia worked at a cafe downtown. Tessa had a friend in that area. Connections in a town like ours are short. I had known sooner or later one would be pulled. She walked along my workbench, dragging one red fingernail over the edge of my tools. She picked up a chisel and put it back in the wrong place. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had been in that workshop hundreds of times. She knew which small disturbances irritated me. "Remember when we used to come here," she said. "Late at night. On the workbench. Remember, baby?" I remembered. Too well. I remembered the first time she came into the shop with bright eyes, saying she wanted to understand how I worked. I remembered how quickly she stopped pretending to care about woodworking and started using the shop as a backdrop for her videos. I remembered the last time she had been there, when she threw a coffee mug across the room because I said I had a deadline. "I want you to leave." "How old is she?" Tessa asked. 40. 50. She turned and looked at me, head tilted. "Are you really that desperate?" "Do not talk about her." She laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "Oh, you're defending her. Goo." I walked to the bay door and rolled it all the way open so the entire street could see inside. I am not sure why. Maybe I wanted air. Maybe I wanted witnesses. Maybe I wanted there to be no shadows. "Tessa, go home." She stood there for a long moment. Then she slowly walked out, her hips swinging. At the doorway, she turned back and said, "This isn't over." I did not answer. After she left, I stood in the workshop for 10 minutes, palms flat on the bench. My hands were shaking, but not the way they used to shake around her. They were shaking from the realization that they were shaking differently. 8 days later, my phone rang. "Mia." Her voice was thin. "There's some woman on our porch asking for Mom. Mom is talking to her. Ethan, please." I broke the speed limit getting there. When I pulled up to the house, I could hear the yelling from the sidewalk. Tessa stood on the porch in that same red dress, mascara smeared, gesturing with her whole body. Diane stood in the doorway, wearing the same cream sweater, the same wooden pencil holding up her hair, one hand on the doorframe like the first night. As I walked up the path, I caught the end of what Tessa was screaming. "You don't even know who he is. He loved me. He'll get bored of you. You're old. You're temporary. You're a replacement. You're stupid." Diane did not interrupt. She let Tessa finish. She let her hear the ugliness of her own words out loud. And she did not move. Then, when Tessa ran out of breath, Diane spoke in the same low, even voice she used when talking about Basil and door handles. "You are not angry at me. You are angry because he chose peace over chaos. That is not my problem to solve." Tessa spun around and saw me climbing the steps. Her eyes were red. She rushed at me and shoved both open palms into my chest. Hard. I did not step back. I did not put my hands on her. I let her push me again. I let the movement burn itself out. I knew that if I touched her, she would make my hands the center of the story. "Tessa," I said quietly, because I knew Diane could hear me. "You did not love me. You loved that I belonged to you. Those are two different things." She stared at me for 1 second. And in that second, I saw the woman she might have become if her wiring had been different. For 4 years, I had waited to see that woman. And then she disappeared again before I could even finish the thought. I waited for fear. For 7 months, I had been afraid of her. Afraid even after leaving. Afraid of the messages. Afraid of the silence between them. Afraid that one day she would find a way to make my life small again. I waited, standing there on Diane's porch with Tessa's hands still pressed against my shirt. But the fear did not come. What came instead was pity. Pity, and the clear understanding that pity is not a reason to return. I understood something else standing there. All that time, I had carried Tessa in my chest like a threat against myself, a reminder of who I was capable of staying with. And now she stood in front of me, smaller than the version of her I had been carrying. Loud, but not strong. Lost, but not terrifying. The thing I feared had been living mostly in my own head. Then she broke into the kind of sobbing that was mostly theater and started making threats. She would tell my parents. She would call my clients. She would destroy me online on every platform and in every group chat she could find. "Do what you think you need to do," I told her. "I do not belong to you anymore." She drove away too fast. Her tires screamed around the corner. Diane and I stood on the porch. Mia had quietly disappeared deeper into the house. The street suddenly felt very still. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should never have brought her to your door." Diane shook her head. She is not your fault. She is your past. There is a difference. I looked at her. The porch light fell across one side of her face. She did not look shaken. She did not even look surprised. You're not afraid? I asked. She might come back. Diane was silent for a moment. Then she turned and looked straight into my eyes. Ethan, I sat beside my husband's bed for the last 6 hours of his life. I buried my father when I was 28. I am not afraid of a girl screaming on my porch. I nodded because I had no idea what to say. The question is not whether she comes back, Diane said. The question is whether you do. Yes, I said.
No pause. No explanation.
She watched me for a long time. Then I do not need to know anything else. I stayed on her porch for another half hour after that. Eventually, Mia came out. Her eyes were a little red, but she was holding herself together. Diane wrapped one arm around her daughter without saying anything. The three of us watched the street grow darker. Nobody spoke. There was nothing words could repair. When I finally drove home that night, I sat on my couch in the dark for 20 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and blocked Tessa's number. For the first time in 7 months. 2 taps. I waited to see if guilt would come. It did not. All I felt was silence shifting one step closer. The next morning, I pulled a cardboard box from my closet. It held the things Tessa had left behind, things I had kept because I told myself it was decent. 2 necklaces. A leather jacket. A leather-bound notebook I had never opened. I packed everything carefully into a shipping box, drove to the post office on Maple Street, and sent it to the last address I had for her. No delivery confirmation. No note. Standing at the counter, I felt a small weight lift from somewhere between my shoulder blades, a weight I had not realized I had been carrying. Then I sat in my truck in the post office parking lot and went through my phone. I deleted every photo she was in. I deleted her number from my contacts. I unfollowed her on every platform. I did not turn it into an event. I simply stopped carrying her in my pocket. I sat with my hands on the steering wheel for several minutes afterward. Late morning sunlight came through the windshield, and I let myself feel how strange it was not to be in a state of chronic, low-level dread. For 4 years, my body had been braced. For 7 months after that, it had still been braced, only waiting for a different kind of impact. I rolled my shoulders back and took a real breath. The first one in a long time that did not taste like expectation. I called my mother that afternoon. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did. I told her about Diane. Not everything. Enough. Her age. The husband she had buried. The first morning in the kitchen. The bookcase I had built for her without overthinking it. My mother was quiet for a long time. I heard the kettle click off in her kitchen in Oregon. 14 years, she said finally. I know. Are you sure? Mom, I said, for the first time in 4 years, I do not have to guess what a woman really means. I am sure. She was silent for another second. Then she said, then bring her to meet me at Christmas. And beneath her voice, I heard a tiny piece of relief. I went to Diane's house 3 days later. Mia was gone. She had left for a 2-week barista course in a city 3 hours north. The house without her was quiet in a different way. Diane led me into the reading room. The walnut bookcase I had built was now full. My work stood beneath the window, holding up her life. I noticed she had placed Mark's books on the lower shelf and hers above them. Not like she was hiding him. More like she had thought carefully about where everyone belonged. She poured 2 glasses of red wine and sat across from me, folding her legs beneath her. I need to tell you something. She admitted she had been afraid too. After Mark, she had promised herself she would never again allow herself to need anyone. For 3 years, she had lived alone. For 3 years, she had been good at it. Better than good. She built a business. A garden. A life. She stopped flinching at the sight of the second pillow on the bed. She stopped waiting for the front door to open at 6 in the evening. She said there had been 2 men in those 3 years. Both kind. Both wrong. One asked her to move in with him after 4 dinners. The other asked her to stop talking about Mark in the second month. She ended things politely with both of them, went home, and felt only relief. She took that as proof. Proof that it was over. Proof that whatever part of her had once belonged to love was gone. Then she looked down into her wine and said, And then you showed up at my door with my drunk daughter on your shoulder. And I thought, there he is. The one I had not allowed myself to wait for. I did not say anything. I simply reached across the small table between us and took her hand. It was the first time I touched her on purpose. Her fingers were cool. They closed around mine. We sat like that for a long time. Neither of us spoke. The wine in our glasses went still. Mia came home a day earlier than planned. She walked into the kitchen at 7 in the morning and saw me at the counter. I was pouring coffee into 2 mugs, one for me, one for her mother. Diane sat on a stool in a robe. Mia stopped. I stopped. Diane did not. Mia looked at her mother, then at me, then at the 2 mugs of coffee, and slowly smiled. I knew it, she said. I knew it from the first night. Diane raised an eyebrow. Mama, when you opened the door, you weren't looking at me. You were looking at him. She was not angry. She was not even surprised. She crossed the kitchen, kissed her mother's temple, then turned to me. Treat her better than anyone ever has. Keep doing that. She hugged Diane. Then she hugged me. Then she pulled a 3rd mug from the shelf and poured herself coffee. And we all stood there in the morning light as if it had always been this way. She asked if her mother was making dinner. She asked if I would be there. Diane said, yes. I said, yes. Mia nodded once, the way her mother sometimes did, and went upstairs to shower. That night, Diane and I sat on the back porch. A wool blanket rested over her shoulders. The air had turned sharp and cool. Autumn was coming. You want this to be real? I asked, out loud, in front of your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors. She tilted her head back and looked at the stars above the brick wall. I spent half my life trying to make other people comfortable. I do not intend to spend the second half doing the same. Then let's try, I said. No performance.
No spectacle.
Just real. Just real, she said. I leaned in and kissed her. It was not a hungry kiss. Not a fireworks kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had waited long enough to know what he was choosing. When I pulled away, her eyes were closed. She kept them closed for one more breath, as if letting herself feel it without witnesses. Then she opened them and looked at me. And some small piece of the woman I had seen standing in the doorway that first night disappeared forever. All that summer, I spent weekends at her house. I rebuilt the back fence out of cedar. I tore down the old outdoor dining table Mark had built and made her a new one, longer and stronger, from white oak. I asked her permission before doing it. She took my face in both hands and said, "Build me a new one." He would have wanted that. I planted a row of lavender along the south wall because she had once mentioned she had always meant to do it. I fixed the leaking faucet in the laundry room that she had ignored for 2 years. I replaced the bulb in the outdoor lantern. None of these things were grand gestures. None of them were for show. It was the small accumulated labor of a man who liked a woman's home enough to want to keep it standing. I noticed something while working in her yard that I had never noticed anywhere else. The shape of peace. With Tessa, even on the good days, there had been a faint static underneath everything. The hum of waiting for the next scene. In Diane's house, there was no static. I could plane a board for an hour, lift my head, and realize my shoulders had dropped away from my ears. She began introducing me to her circle. Most of them were women her age, friends with 20 years of history, along with a few former design clients. I prepared myself for judgment. I got something else instead. Curiosity. A few sharp questions, but not cruel ones. One of them, a retired professor named Helen, asked me over dinner, "What will you be doing in 20 years?" I told her I would be building the same furniture in the same shop, just more slowly. She laughed and told Diane I was a keeper. Diane only sipped her wine. Margaret, her oldest friend, caught me later that same evening and gripped my arm just above the elbow. "She has not laughed like that in 3 years," Margaret said. "Do not ruin this." "No, I said. And I meant it. One night, very late, Diane and I were lying in bed, simply talking, not touching. The window was open. The curtain moved in the night air. I said something I had been carrying for weeks. "When you are 60, I will be 46. When you are 70, I will be 56. I know. Does that scare you?" She was quiet. Then she turned toward me on the pillow. Yes, she said. But I am more afraid of living carefully and dying with regret. Mark taught me that. Not by how he lived, but by how he left. I lay with that for a long time. And I understood something I had been circling for months. I was not replacing Mark. I was not in some silent competition with a dead man. I was living my own life. And every day, Diane chose to share it with me. 8 months passed. I opened a second workshop downtown, 3 times the size of my East Side shop. Diane designed the interior. It was our first project together. She refused to invoice me. I paid her by building a new writing desk for the office she was renovating. Walnut top, hand-cut dovetails, brass handles I cast at a friend's forge. The first day she sat behind it, she ran her palm over the surface twice, slowly. Then she looked at me and simply nodded. Mia finished her course and opened a small cafe with a friend from school. They named it Slow Morning. I built the bar from reclaimed oak taken from an old barn outside town. I did not charge her. She framed the invoice I never gave her and hung it behind the espresso machine as a joke. I flew my mother in from Oregon in October. She and Diane spent 4 hours in the kitchen on the first day, making a pie from my grandmother's recipe. They talked about things I could not hear from the next room. When I drove my mother to the airport at the end of the week, she placed her hand on my forearm by the curb and said, "She will not hurt you. I can feel it." She said nothing more. She did not need to. Diane and I were not married. We did not live together. I kept my apartment, my space, the silence of my mornings. She kept her house, her habits, her own space. But I had a key to her home, and she had a key to mine. We had dinner together 4 nights a week, sometimes 5. We did not need to merge our lives completely to know they belonged in the same room. One early autumn afternoon, I was sitting with Diane in MIA's cafe. The 2 of us were sharing a slice of olive oil cake at a table by the window. I looked up by accident and saw Tessa through the glass on the other side of the street. She had seen me first. She stopped at the curb, looked at me, then at Diane, then at my hand resting on the small of Diane's back. I did not think. My body tensed. Everything in me prepared. But Tessa did not come inside. She did not scream. She only nodded. Barely. Almost like she was confirming something to herself. Then she crossed the street and kept walking. I watched her until she turned the corner. I noticed she was wearing flats. Tessa used to refuse to leave the apartment without heels. Maybe something in her had quieted too. Or maybe she was simply tired of the game. Either way, it was no longer mine to solve. Who was that? Diane asked without turning around. No one anymore, I said. And it was true. Not because I hated Tessa. Because I no longer needed her to mean anything to me. I did not need to make her the villain. I did not need to defeat her. I did not need her forgiveness or her apology. I had stopped writing her into the story of my life, and the page had finally gone blank. That evening, we drove back to Diane's house. The first cold front of the season arrived while we were at the cafe. I built a fire in the living room fireplace, the same one Mark had laid by hand the summer before he died. Dry oak caught quickly, and I crouched there watching the flames find their shape. Diane curled into the armchair across from me with her legs tucked beneath her and a book in her hands. The lamp cast warm light over her hair. I watched her for a while. She was wearing the reading glasses she rarely used. Fine lines rested at the corners of her eyes. I thought about that first night. The wool dress. Her hand on the doorframe. The rain beginning right as she told me to come inside. I thought about how close I had come to standing on that porch for one more polite second and then turning away. How close I had come to thanking her, refusing her invitation, driving home through the wet streets, and never returning. I had almost said no. I thought about how I almost went back to my empty apartment, slept alone, and kept pretending I was fine. And I would have been fine. That was the part that still frightened me. I would have been fine for the rest of my life in a small, grey, normal kind of way. And I never would have known what I had missed. She looked up and caught me watching. What? Nothing, I said. Just thank you for opening the door. She smiled without showing her teeth. The same smile from the first night. Thank you for walking through it. I used to believe love had to be loud to be real. I thought it had to be full of tears and jealousy and sleepless nights because two people wanted each other too fiercely to be gentle. I thought that if a woman did not hurt me, then maybe she did not truly need me. Diane never hurt me. She never staged scenes. She never checked my phone. She never threatened to leave just to see whether I would chase her. And for the first 6 months, in some buried corner of my chest, I kept asking myself, is this real love? Or am I simply settling for less? Then I figured it out. I had mistaken chaos for passion. I had mistaken exhaustion for attachment. I had spent 4 years in a relationship where love was measured in decibels, and I came out convinced that was the only key in which the song could be played. Diane taught me another one. The love of a grown woman, a woman who had buried a husband, raised a daughter, lived alone long enough to know she did not need anyone to make her whole. That kind of love is quiet. It does not need to prove itself. It only needs to be received. I will not pretend age means nothing. There are nights I lie awake thinking about it. There are days I think about the math, about who is more likely to be left alone. But I would rather have 10 real years than 50 pretend ones. I would rather sit at her bedside one day, the way she sat at Mark's, than wake up at 60 beside someone I never truly allowed inside. The night Diane opened the door, she did not save me. She simply showed me that another door existed. Walking through it was something I had to do myself. So tonight, I want to ask you 2 things. First, have you ever mistaken noise for love? Have you ever stayed with someone because their chaos made you feel needed, not because their presence made you feel calm? Second, if a quiet door opened for you tonight, a door that promised nothing except kindness, would you have the courage to step inside? Or would you drive back to your empty apartment because the familiar always feels safer than the true? If this story touched you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your own story. I read them all. See you in the next one.